In this episode, we'll be talking about 5 things you may want to be aware of concerning your RPod. Each of these 5 items I've dealt with personally on my unit. They're issues you as an RPod owner may want to fully understand. Hey everybody, this is John Marucci. Thanks for visiting the On the Road YouTube channel. This channel is all about helping you get the most out of your RPod experience. Before we get going, welcome to the channel. If you're new here, remember to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified when new videos are published. If you want to dive deeper, we put more content on Instagram and Twitter at John Marucci. So let's jump in. You know, there are 5 things that we ran into as RPod owners that you may have to deal with too occasionally. So these aren't guaranteed that they're going to happen to your unit, but they did happen with me and are things I had to handle sometimes on the road. So these 5 things are rather important to be aware of, and we have covered some of these in other videos just to notate. The first one is the black tank hanger failure. So this happened to us on the way back from Florida last winter when we were coming up I-65 just north of Indianapolis. We stopped at a rest stop and realized that the black tank hanger was floating midair and had become detached from the frame of the RPod. Fortunately, it didn't drag on the ground and break, but it was detached. So we had to deal with that. We had to kind of jerry-rig it at the time to get us back home, and then we dealt with it by putting a new nut and bolt and then a hanger strap on there as well a little later to fix it. We haven't had any problems since, but that's one of the bigger complaints that is on most of the forums about the black tank hanger just failing. And I think the main issue is in manufacturing that they don't use a very strong bolt and nut that keeps that on through vibration. So just be aware of that. If you have a newer unit, something in the range of 2016 plus, those are where I think most of the issues are being recorded from, but you may want to check it no matter what unit you have. Make sure your hangers are tight, that nut and bolt have not come loose at all, and you may want to think about even replacing that with a better bolt and a Loctite nut. And think about putting strapping on there as well. And there's a lot of coverage on the RPod Owners Forum and other places that you can find out more about that, as well as the video we put together. We actually have 2 videos on this concerning this situation. Okay, number 2 is the converter failure, the power converter failure. We had this happen to us this last camping season as we were on the road. We're actually up at Holland State Park in Holland, Michigan, off Lake Michigan, and found out that our battery was draining and not fully charging anymore. And the lights wouldn't come on when you unplug the 30 amp cord from shore power. So we figured out what was going on, asking a few people on the forums, and found out, yeah, it was a converter failure. What we immediately did was went out and we got a battery charger to keep the thing going while we were on the trip, and then got a new converter and replaced the old and broken converter. Now there's a whole video on step-by-step process on how to do that, which I think is very thorough. If you ever run into this issue, what we ended up doing is replacing the converter and then sending the faulty one back to the manufacturer and got a replacement of that. So we actually have an extra with us now, but we also always carry a battery charger with us now because of this situation. So be aware of that. This is a fairly common failure. Ours failed at 18 months, by the way, and these converters have a 2-year warranty. So be aware of that. Okay, the third one is the shower surround separation. Now, this is something that most people have heard about if you've been on the forums with some of the RPods, and it seems to be most of the RPods that were built in the winter months. What I think is happening is that they're putting the RPod shower surrounds, and if you remember, the shower surrounds started in the 2017 models and later. Before that, like my 2016 171 had a fabric backing around the shower stall. My 17 179 has a plastic shower surround, and it did come loose by the door when it got warmer weather. So my theory on this is that my unit was built in the winter months in January, February of 17, and some of those were built in the colder weather. They were caulked, and then when we had really hot weather, they expanded like most materials do, and a gap was created between the wall and separated the shower surround. We had to put some double-sided tape in and recaulk, and haven't had an issue since, but this seems to be a common problem as well that you may run into, so just be aware of that. Okay, number 4 is the kitchen sink not being caulked properly. So we ran into this pretty early on, especially those inlay sinks. You may want to check the caulk if the silicone isn't caulked real well. What will happen is if you get water in there, it'll start leaking underneath behind the sink and into the area under the sink, and you'll find some water stains, etc., and drippage, etc. So what we did pretty quickly, actually, once we found this happen, and I'm pretty sure it happened on both units. It happened on the 171 and the 179. We just took some silicone caulk and did our own beading on the around the sink in there and the inlay, and hasn't had a problem since. But be aware that's something that sometimes can happen if you have a unit that wasn't caulked properly in the factory as it came out. So just be aware of that. So the caulk around the sink. And the fifth one is the loose ottoman, the DINETTE ottoman in the 179 specifically. So these are, if you remember, the 179 unit has two ottomans. We use them kind of as footstools when you're sitting back in the dinette. But what happens is they can come loose, and we had one come very loose, and some of the pictures show that what was happening over time is as you get in and out of the dinette, you end up kicking it a little bit, moving it a little bit, and the screws really aren't in the floor, aren't really into anything solid, so they just start gouging out the floor, and you end up with a pretty good gap, as we had. So we have a video on replacing, actually removing the ottoman and caulking properly and fixing the floor properly. But this is something that can come loose over time for your ottomans, especially in a 179. Just because of the way they're manufactured, the screws don't actually go into anything more than just the subfloor and not any main structure. We don't have a great solution for this, by the way, and we haven't really developed one as far as fixing something like that. Basically, you can sink some more screws in, but just be aware you're sinking more screws into the floor. You're not really going into any substructure or frame material at all. And what could happen is that could just cause more holes in your floor. So this is, in my mind, isn't a great thing that's going on with the ottomans and them coming loose, but there's not a great solution that I know of. And by the way, if you have a solution for that we haven't heard about, feel free to put it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. If you figured out a way to secure those ottomans better over time, that they don't shake loose, it's really good. So there are the 5 things that we had to deal with. All of them issues that were real issues, some of them that can cause quite a bit of trouble if you're not aware of it. Especially the black tank issue where the drain pipe can come loose. Very important that you understand that and make sure you fortify that if you need to. But you need to keep an eye on it as you travel. So anyway, that's this video, these 5 things we ran into. Hopefully you won't have to run into any of them, but it's always good to be aware, have level set expectations, and be aware of what you may run into with the R-Pod. Anyway, if you like this video, again, like it and give it a thumbs up. We really appreciate that. Again, love to have your comments. Your comments are great for everyone watching the videos and sharing with other people. Sometimes we have great comments from folks that really help other people, so we love to hear from you. Anyway, this is John Marucci. Thanks again for watching, and so long for now.